The Saints have Derek Carr injured. The Jets, we just talked about all the issues. Is Davante Adams going to be the guy that gets them over the hump? And actually, the price for Davante Adams continues to, I guess, stay the same. They want a second-round pick. And actually, Bill Belichick and Michael Lombardi, former GM, they talked about the situation here. So let's play a little bit of that clip, and then we'll talk about it on the other side.
Wants to get traded. That's going to be a big story. And I have a feeling that, as we tape this, by the end of this week, he probably will get traded.
Not for a second-round pick, which supposedly is what they're asking for.
That's ridiculous.
I don't see how anybody's going to give a second-round pick for him. You'd have to feel like this guy is going to, Adams is going to take us to the promised land, and he's going to get us over the hump this year because he's also got a big salary.
To me, the hard part is that you've taken away all my leverage. Right, he's now, his contract's huge. He's making now it was $950 come off, so say he's around $12 million. I want to get away from the contract. The next team that wants him doesn't want the contract next year, so I think you're going to have to trade him for a conditional pick that could grow based on his productivity. But you're going to have to get more than one suitor in this. Right now, the Jets are sitting there thinking they're the only team. New Orleans doesn't have enough cap room, and
unless you take some of the contract.
Unless you take some.
Would you do that?
I'd have a hard time doing that. I mean, I know I got to get rid of them, but I think if I got the draft, but then the draft pick's got to go up.
That's right.
If you're going to give me a good,
the more you pay, then the higher the pick.
That's right. I'm not for a 6th-round pick. I'm not paying the salary here. Let's forget about that. But you want to give me a 2? I got no problem paying. I mean, we've seen that before. I know the league says you're not allowed to pay for picks, but this is paying for picks, right?
Right.
So that's exactly what it is. We're working it a different way, but the draft picks have a value to them. So you eat part of the contract, you're basically buying the pick. I think again, you hit it on the head. One of the things that's hard about trades is everyone's like, "Oh, just trade a player." But you said it, Mike. You have to have somebody willing to work with, and that's not as easy, I think, as everybody thinks.
Well, Springsteen has this great line. He says, "Sometimes I can't tell my courage from my desperation," and I think that that when they've announced that they're going to trade him, they're desperate. Like, this is the courageous move was to trade Davante Adams in the offseason. You would have taken a lot of shit, and people would have said, "Oh my God, what are you doing? How could you trade this guy? He's so great." But that would have been courageous. Now you're desperate, and when you're other teams, this, other teams are circling in the water like sharks. You got to trade him. He's unhappy, and his agent's probably calling every team in the league saying, "You can have my guy if you want him, but this is what it's going to take." So it becomes now you're negotiating against his agent, and you're negotiating with these other teams, and meanwhile you're going to have to go walk in and tell Mark Davis, "We're going to have to pay $10 million of this guy's salary for him to play for some other team," and then he's going to watch the highlights and say, "Why did we trade him?"
Yeah, it's a tough situation. That's why if you see that storm coming and it's brewing, it's a lot better to do it earlier rather than later.
So right there, he says it's always want to be ahead of it. And it just felt like the Raiders probably should have done this in the offseason. When they traded his best friend away, by the way, Derek Carr, to the Saints, who he went to Vegas to play with. When you benched him last year, then he played. There's a lot of turmoil there with the Raiders. I like Antonio Pierce. He's trying to change the culture, but that's not a team right now that is trying to win right now. They don't have a franchise quarterback. I do think it's pretty funny, Zach.
Yeah.
About the second-round pick. I wouldn't pay for a second-round pick. Bill Belichick paid for a second-round pick, if I'm not mistaken. You remember that player?
So it is funny, and everyone on the internet was quick to remind Bill Belichick. Bill said, "I don't know why anyone would give up a second-round pick for Davante Adams." Well, unfortunately, Bill, when he was the GM/head coach of the New England Patriots in 2020, the New England Patriots sent a second-round pick to the Atlanta Falcons for Mohamed Sanu. Not really Mohamed Sanu. Hell of a receiver. I mean, talking about one of the more underrated guys, caught everything. Also a hell of a quarterback when the trick plays, but not necessarily sure Mohamed Sanu is on a Davante Adams level. No. So maybe Bill, that was coming out of a little regret, maybe. Of the don't send a second for a receiver.
I was just about to say that, like, in Bill's defense, maybe this is one of those things where, like, hey, I've been there before, and I'm not fucking doing that again.
Yeah,
which it very well could be.
Very, very well. And also, when you're looking at, they tried to take a chance at Sanu at the time, which wasn't the youngest receiver, but a guy that could have been in his prime that maybe needed the right opportunity, but he was never a top dog. Like Davante's been a top dog.
Yeah.
And he can help a team win. And so that was obviously this courtesy of Bill Belichick and Michael Lombardi on the Underdog, their show over there. And it is kind of crazy when you think about it. And then I just saw on Kay Adams' show on Up and Adams and Marcel Reese, former Raider, they're saying that Davante Adams, there could be a sleeper team in there that possibly could be Buffalo. So we won't jump to conclusions. It could be a while, but we've seen a lot of other wide receivers traded for third-round picks, fourth-round picks, or later. It just doesn't make any sense. As great as Davante has been and some of these other receivers that were great at the time they were traded, I don't see it all being mixed in there. But certainly, I don't know if Davante is going to be the piece, though, going back to get it over the fact that the Jets said.
Yeah, and my final thing I want to say about Davante, because I know Ravens fans are up in the air about the Ravens don't need Davante Adams. I don't see, one, with the cap situation, two, with the age situation. You went out there and you got Derrick Henry to run the damn ball. Let's not take that away. I think they have enough weapons when you bring in the effect of likely Andrews Kolar. You got Flowers. You've got Bateman. I think with Derrick Henry and stuff, I'm not sure we need someone who is coming in here. Like we've seen Zay last game, over 100 yards. Game before, 1 reception for 10 yards. So
my only rebuttal
with this offense, I would prefer we don't have a guy that needs the ball.
My only rebuttal to that is that the years that so Shannon Sharp, I could argue as a wide receiver 1 when the Ravens won the Super Bowl back in 2000.
Yeah.
Then in 2012, 2013, it was Anquan Bolden. In order to get deep into the playoffs, I'm not saying it's a requirement, but it makes it a much easier journey to get to the Super Bowl when you have a wide receiver 1 at your disposal. Derrick Henry is an absolute dog, but we saw what happened when the Cincinnati Bengals took Derrick Henry away.
Yeah.
And yes, they were able to score a lot of points against a 30th ranked defense, but it wasn't going to be good enough. It won't be good enough against a top defense when they can take that running game away. Yeah. So they're going to need, I think they are going to, if they don't find a wide receiver 1, they're going to have to figure out the passing game a little bit better in order to actually go deeper into the playoffs. Because when you start to face those elite defenses and you take that run game away, especially if you're trying to come back from a lead, it's going to be really hard for the Ravens to do that if you don't have the passing game there.
Yeah, well, I think the other part, too, is you just got to have a guy that fits that mold. Like, we know the talent that Zay Flowers is. The guy that actually could, and if he continues his rise, would be Bateman. Bateman can separate, and he can win contested catches. He's not saying he's the best 50-50 ball guy, but what you've seen him, he's made tough catches. Mark Andrews can make tough catches. So can Isaiah Likely. But to your point, Brad, when the Ravens were on the playoff run, Anquan Bolden was making catch after catch. That Colts game was unbelievable. And the Patriots, the Super Bowl, Anquan Bolden was coming up with big plays. Torrey Smith had his role as well.
Right.
But we'll find out. It's time. But the Ravens are in a good position, everyone. Good position.